I used to tell myself it was harmless. Just a glance across the hedge. Just a polite hello when she watered her roses in the early evenings. But lately, every small moment with her felt like a thread tightening between us. Invisible, but impossible to break. Her name was Elise. Mid-40s, calm in a way that made the world slow down around her. She had this habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, and somehow it always left a faint streak of flower or garden soil on her cheek. It shouldn't have been beautiful, but it was. She made imperfect things feel deliberate. The first time I noticed her differently, the light was fading, the kind of gold that stretches across fences and touches everything softly. She was on her porch, fixing a loose hook on a hanging plant. Her husband's car wasn't in the driveway. I offered to help before I even thought about it. She looked down at me, not in that polite neighbor way, but like she was deciding whether she should let me. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," I replied. "But I want to." Her smile was small, uneven. "Then hold it steady for me." When I reached up, our hands brushed. It should have meant nothing, but the air shifted. The plant swung gently between us, her fingers grazing mine again as she adjusted the hook. The silence after was heavier than the summer heat. "You're good at fixing things," she said. I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "I'm just tall." She laughed quietly. It wasn't loud, but it stayed in the air longer than it should have. After that, it became routine. I'd hear her voice from the garden, asking about small favors. A jar she couldn't open, a light that flickered, something trivial that didn't really need fixing. But she'd wait until her husband was out, and I'd pretend not to notice that pattern. She'd thank me with that same quiet tone, her hand sometimes brushing my arm just long enough to feel the warmth of her skin. It wasn't just an attraction. It was something quieter, an awareness that neither of us wanted to name. One evening, rain started before either of us realized it. She was outside, gathering the laundry she'd hung earlier. I ran over to help, instinct more than I thought. She looked startled when she saw me through the rain. "You'll get soaked," she said. "So will you." For a second, we both just stood there, laughing at how absurd we looked. Wet clothes clinging, hair plastered down, arms full of half-dry sheets. Then the laughter faded, and we were suddenly too close. Her eyes flicked down, not shy, not bold, just caught between something. I handed her the last shirt. Our fingers stayed locked around it for a heartbeat too long. Her breath hitched, barely audible over the rain. "Thank you," she whispered, though it sounded more like a warning than gratitude. That night, I couldn't sleep. I could still feel the damp cotton between our hands, the scent of her shampoo mixed with rain. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that look, the one she gave right before she turned away. The next morning, I told myself to keep my distance. I even avoided looking toward her house when I stepped outside. But as I was backing out of my driveway, I caught sight of her on her porch again. She was holding a mug, steam curling up into the cool air. And then, she looked straight at me. No wave, no smile, just that quiet, unreadable gaze that made it impossible to leave. I forgot to shift gears. The car rolled forward a few inches before I stopped it. She tilted her head slightly, lips parting as if to say something. But before she could, her husband's car turned into the driveway. Her eyes flicked toward him, then back at me. And just like that, she disappeared inside. After that morning, I tried to pretend things were normal again. Waves across the fence, small talk about the weather, nothing more. But everything between us had changed, subtly, quietly, like someone had turned down the volume on the rest of the world and left only the sound of her voice. A week later, she knocked on my door. It was late afternoon, the kind of time when light comes in sideways and makes dust look like gold. She held a small basket of lemons. "I overbought," she said. "Thought you might want some." I smiled, though it came out awkward. "Thanks. I'll, make something with them." She hesitated, her hand still on the basket. "You cook?" "I'll try," I said. "Mostly pasta. Sometimes I burn it." That earned me a real smile. Brief, but soft enough to make my chest tighten. When she stepped inside, I realized how strange it was. Her in my kitchen, sunlight glinting on her hair, the faint scent of jasmine following her. She looked around like she hadn't been inside a young man's apartment in a long time. Not judgmental, just curious, almost wistful. Her fingers trailed over the counter, tapping once on a small chip in the tile. "You live alone?" I nodded. "Yeah. Been on my own since I moved out for work. It gets quiet sometimes." she hummed, still looking at the countertop. Quiet can be complicated. There was something in the way she said it, the kind of tone that holds a story underneath. I wanted to ask, but she didn't leave room for questions. Instead, she turned, brushing past me on her way to the door. The touch was accidental, probably, but her shoulder grazed my arm, and the warmth of it stayed long after she'd stepped back. Her husband traveled a lot. I knew that now. People in the neighborhood talked. He was gone most weeks, home just long enough to mow the lawn and make polite conversation. I never asked how she felt about it, but sometimes, when I saw her tending her flowers alone, I thought I already knew. Days blurred into quiet encounters, the kind where words filled space but meant something else entirely. She'd come by asking for help with the garden hose, her hand occasionally resting on my arm as she thanked me. I'd noticed the faint lines near her eyes when she smiled, the soft curve of her neck as she turned to speak. Every detail started to feel like something I shouldn't notice, but couldn't stop seeing. Once, as we leaned over the same rose bush, she reached for a thorn stem at the same time I did. Her fingers brushed mine, warm, deliberate this time, and stayed there a second longer than necessary. Neither of us moved. She looked up, eyes catching the afternoon light. "Careful," she murmured. "You'll cut yourself." I swallowed, unable to look away. Too late. The silence that followed was heavier than words could carry. She pulled her hand back slowly, glancing toward her house. The sound of wind moved through the trees, a reminder that the world still existed outside this small, impossible distance between us. "I should go," she said softly. I nodded. But as she turned, she hesitated, fingers brushing the edge of the garden fence. Then she looked back at me, just once. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something. Maybe a warning, maybe something braver, but she didn't. She only smiled, faintly, almost sadly. And before she walked away, she reached out. Her fingertips touched my sleeve, light as breath. "Thank you," she whispered. She didn't say what. But that touch, that single, trembling second, said everything. It started raining again, the kind that made everything smell like wet earth and memory. I saw her through my kitchen window, trying to drag a tarp over her garden table before the downpour hit. I didn't even think, just grabbed my jacket and crossed the lawn. She looked up when I reached her. "You'll get soaked," she said, the same words as before. I smiled. "Seems to be our thing." The tarp slipped from her fingers, and we both reached for it at once. Our hands met, skin against skin, damp and cold but electric. For a second, neither of us moved. "Hold it down," she whispered, her breath close to my ear. We fought the wind together, laughter catching between us like shared breath. When we finally the tarp secured, we stood there, hair dripping, shoulders almost touching. "You should come in," she said, "before you freeze." Inside, the house smelled faintly of vanilla and rain. She handed me a towel, and I took it, my fingers brushing hers again. Everything about her felt too close, her voice, her scent, the soft rhythm of her breathing. "You didn't have to help," she said quietly. "You always do." I wanted to. She turned at that, really looked at me. The air between us shifted, slow and charged. I could see the tiny droplets on her eyelashes, the faint pink in her cheeks from the cold. Then a sound broke the moment, a phone buzzing on the counter. She froze. Her husband's name flashed across the screen. Neither of us spoke. The buzzing stopped, then started again, relentless. Finally, she answered. Her tone changed instantly, polite, distant, practiced. "Yes, I'm home." "No, it's fine. Just raining again." She listened, eyes unfocused, nodding to words I couldn't hear. When she hung up, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. "I shouldn't have," she started, then stopped. Her voice cracked just slightly. "It's complicated." "I know," I said. "You don't have to explain." She shook her head. "But I do. You're young. You think this is just." "It's not." The words came out sharper than I meant. She looked at me then, really looked, as if searching for something she shouldn't want to find. "You don't understand what people would say," she whispered. "What it would do. I don't care what they'd say." That made her laugh, quiet, bitter, almost sad. "You would. Eventually." We were standing close enough now that I could feel the warmth from her skin, smell the faint trace of her perfume. Her hand lifted halfway, like she might touch my face, then stopped in midair. Time stretched. The rain outside softened to a whisper. I could feel her hesitation trembling between us. And then, footsteps outside. A knock at the door. Her eyes widened. I stepped back instinctively as she glanced toward the window. Please, she mouthed, barely a breath. I nodded, slipped out the back before the door opened. From behind the hedge, I saw her greet the neighbor, a woman from down the street, smiling, chatting like nothing had happened. Her voice was calm, her posture perfect. But when the woman left, Elise turned toward the window again. Her eyes found mine through the glass, brief, unguarded, almost pleading. Neither of us smiled. And though I was standing in the rain, I couldn't move. Days passed in fragments, glances through curtains, footsteps that paused outside her door, moments that almost meant nothing, and yet meant everything. I told myself to stop. I even tried avoiding the path that ran past her house. But one evening, just before sunset, I saw her standing by the mailbox, staring at nothing. I slowed my steps. You okay? She startled slightly, then smiled, tired and small. Just thinking. About what? About how time slips by without asking permission. Her tone was half a whisper, half something else, something she didn't want to say out loud. The air between us felt like it was holding its breath. She looked up, eyes catching the last orange light of day. Do you ever wish you hadn't started something you can't finish? I haven't started anything, I said softly. Not yet. Her lips parted, but no words came. She turned away first, walking back toward her porch. I followed without thinking. Inside, the house was dim, the faint hum of a ceiling fan breaking the silence. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the table, the rim marked with her lipstick. She picked it up, then set it down again, her hands trembling slightly. He's coming home tomorrow, she said. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. For long. A week. She gave a short, bitter laugh. Maybe less. He never stays long. There was a pause, long enough for both of us to hear the other breathing. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I know. So why are you? I didn't answer. I just stepped closer, slowly, carefully, until I could see the pulse moving at her neck. My hand lifted, uninvited but not refused, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered shut, and for a moment, everything outside the room vanished. Elise, I said her name like it wasn't supposed to exist out loud. When she opened her eyes, they were darker, softer. She leaned slightly, almost imperceptibly, until her forehead rested against my chest. I can't do this, she breathed. But she didn't move away. My hand found her back, tentative at first. The fabric of her blouse was thin, warm from her skin. She drew in a shaky breath, and I felt it. The rise and fall of her chest against me, the tiny tremor of restraint in both of us. Her fingers curled against my shirt. You should hate me for this. I don't. Her laugh came out like a sigh. You don't even know what this is. Then tell me. I said. Tell me to leave. Silence. She didn't tell me to leave. Instead, she lifted her head. Our faces were close enough that I could feel her breath against my mouth. Warm, uneven, uncertain. Her eyes searched mine, not for permission, but for a reason not to continue. Someone's going to get hurt, she said, barely a whisper. Maybe, I said. But it already happened. For a second, everything in the world narrowed to that one fragile distance between us. A heartbeat, a breath, a trembling possibility. Her hand rose, touched my cheek, fingers tracing lightly along my jaw. I leaned forward just enough that the space between us became a question neither of us could answer. And then, a car door slammed outside. She froze, eyes wide. The sound of footsteps on the gravel. Elise, a voice called from the driveway. Her husband. She stumbled back, hand covering her mouth. The air between us shattered. I didn't move, couldn't breathe. Elise, I whispered. Go, she said, a single word, trembling but resolute. Please. I slipped out the back door, heart pounding, the taste of her almost touch still on my lips. Behind me, I heard her voice through the open window, calm, practiced, pretending. I didn't see her for 3 days. The house stayed dark, blinds drawn, porch empty. I told myself she needed space, but by the 4th morning, my chest ached with something I couldn't name. Then her husband stopped me in the driveway. Hey, he said, casual, too friendly. You've been helping Elise with the garden, right? I froze. Yeah, a bit. He smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. She talks about you. My throat went dry. Oh, just neighbor stuff. He nodded, slow. Sure. He looked at me for a moment longer than necessary, then turned away. Appreciate you looking out for her. When he drove off, my hands were shaking. That night, I found her outside. Finally, standing by the fence, arms folded against the cold. The porch light threw a faint halo over her hair. You shouldn't be here, she said, voice low. He talked to me today, I said. Your husband. Her eyes flicked up, sharp. What did he say? That you talk about me. She looked away. People say things when they're lonely. Is that what this is? I asked. Loneliness. She didn't answer, just exhaled slowly, the sound trembling at the edges. Then, barely audible, he knows. The words dropped between us like glass breaking. I stepped closer. Know what? Her hands tightened around her arms. Not everything, but enough. He heard us that night, before you left. The world tilted slightly. Then why didn't he? Because pretending keeps things cleaner, she said. Easier to live with. I could see the strain on her face, the kind that comes from holding something heavy for too long. She looked older in that moment, but also softer, real in a way I hadn't seen before. Elise, I started. She shook her head. You shouldn't care about me. You're too young to carry someone else's ruins. I'm already carrying them. Her breath caught. She turned, facing me now, close enough that I could see the shimmer of unshed tears at the corner of her eyes. You don't know what I've done, she whispered. Then tell me. Her silence was enough. She reached for the fence between us, her fingers brushing mine through the slats, a touch that felt more like a confession than anything she could have said. I used to think I missed being loved, she said quietly. Now I think I just missed being seen. Her voice wavered, breaking on the last word. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, the space between our hands growing smaller until her palm pressed against mine. We stood like that, nothing spoken, everything said, until she pulled away, quickly, like the touch burned. He's leaving again tomorrow, she said, her voice steadying itself. If you come by, don't knock. Just wait by the side gate. Elise. She stepped closer, enough for the scent of her skin to find me again, warm and faintly sweet. This isn't safe anymore, she said. But I can't seem to stop. And before I could answer, she turned and walked back into the house, leaving the door open just long enough for her final words to drift back into the night. Neither can you. The next evening, the world felt too still. The kind of stillness that comes before something breaks. Her husband's car was gone. The house lights were dim. Only the porch lamp burned, faint, deliberate, as if waiting. I told myself not to go. I told myself that whatever I felt was already too far gone. And yet, I found myself standing by the side gate. She opened it before I could knock. You came. Her voice wasn't surprised, just quiet, resigned. I nodded. You asked me to. She looked at me for a long moment, then stepped back to let me in. The air between us felt heavy, full of everything we hadn't said. Inside, the living room glowed with low lamplight. A record played softly in the background, old jazz, the kind that fills silence without really breaking it. She stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. He left this morning, she said. He said he'd call when he gets to Chicago. I moved closer, just enough to feel the warmth radiating from her. And you? She smiled faintly. I didn't tell him I'd see you. Something in her tone made my pulse stutter. Why did you ask me to come? Her eyes met mine. Because pretending doesn't work anymore. She took a step forward, then another, until we were close enough that I could see the small scar near her collarbone, the one I'd never noticed before. I tried to forget you, she said softly. I told myself you were just curious, that it would fade. But it didn't. I swallowed hard. It won't fade for me either. Her breath hitched. She reached up, fingers trembling slightly, and brushed my cheek. The touch was light, but it felt like gravity. This is wrong, she whispered. I know. But it feels, she trailed off, unable to finish. I leaned in, not enough to close the distance, just enough to feel her breath against my lips. Real. Her eyes fluttered shut. Too real. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to this. Her scent, the warmth of her hand against my face, the soft catch of her breathing. I could have kissed her then. Every cell in my body wanted to. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped back. If I stay, you'll regret it. She opened her eyes, and they weren't angry, just full. And if you go, I'll still regret it. The record skipped, a faint crackle filling the silence. She turned away, pressing her hand against her mouth as if holding something in. You make me remember what it felt like to want something just for myself. Her voice broke on the last word. I crossed the space between us, gently took her hand, and placed it against my chest. Then remember, I said, even if this ends here. Her fingers curled slightly, feeling the rhythm of my heartbeat under her palm. You'll leave? If I stay, I'll never leave, I said. She looked up then, tears glinting in her eyes, but her mouth curved in the smallest, saddest smile. You already didn't. We stood there, inches apart, the air between us trembling with everything we could have been. And then, she leaned forward, her forehead against mine. Goodbye, she whispered. It wasn't a rejection, it was surrender. The kind that hurts because it's honest. Weeks passed before I saw her again. The days had started to cool, the garden thinning out, the air softer somehow. I thought she'd moved on, that maybe we both had. But one Sunday morning, I found her sitting on the porch steps, coffee mug in hand, eyes distant. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. I thought you'd stopped walking this way. I tried. A small smile tugged at her mouth, tired but genuine. You were always bad at pretending. I stopped a few feet away, unsure how close was safe anymore. The light touched her face gently, and for a moment, she looked almost peaceful. He left, she said after a pause. For good this time. I didn't ask how she felt. I could see it in her posture, in the stillness of her hands. A strange mix of relief and something heavier. I'm sorry, I said quietly. She shook her head. Don't be. Some endings arrive long before you admit them. The silence that followed wasn't sharp anymore. Just quiet, calm. The kind of silence you can breathe in. I stepped closer. Elise. Her name still carried the same weight, though now it felt softer. Not a secret, just something fragile. She looked up, meeting my eyes. Do you regret it? I thought about the rain, the late-night calls, the almost kisses, the ache that lived somewhere between guilt and longing. Then I shook my head. No, I think we were what we needed to be, even if only for a while. She exhaled slow. You sound older. Maybe I am. For the first time in months, she laughed, low, warm, a sound that made everything else fade. Then she patted the step beside her. Sit. I did. The wood was cool under us, the morning light spilling across the porch. She leaned back slightly, close enough that our shoulders brushed. The contact was small, but steady, like a heartbeat finding rhythm again. I used to think love had to last forever to mean something, she said. Now I think it just has to be real when it's here. I looked at her, at the fine lines around her eyes, the way the light caught in her hair. Then this was real. She nodded, gaze fixed on the garden. It was. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. Her hand found mine on the step, slow, deliberate, and our fingers intertwined. Not to promise, not to claim, just to say I remember. The wind moved through the roses, a few petals drifting across the porch. She turned toward me, resting her head lightly on my shoulder. For the first time, there was no hesitation, no guilt. Just two people sitting quietly inside something they both knew had changed them. After a while, she whispered, You'll find someone your age, someone who can start with you, not halfway through. Maybe, I said, but she won't be you. She smiled, that same small, uneven smile from the very beginning. No, but maybe that's the point. The morning stretched on. We didn't move. When she finally stood, she squeezed my hand once before letting go. Take care of yourself. You too. And as she walked back into the house, sunlight trailing behind her, I realized some loves don't fade. They just find quieter forms to live in. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?